And hello and welcome back. This is our special bonus session for the Gold Key release Going Deeper, the Tongue Mudra. And tongue Mudra is a very powerful action pattern that produces far reaching effects that are comparable to and support the results of the different tetraseed transformation procedures, of which the Gold Key release is one. And in this session, I'm going to be teaching you whatever you can internalize and make functional in yourself during this 90-minute period. What that implies is that we may or may not get through all of the variations of the Gold Key release, in which case we will pick up where we left off in next week's planned session. So in this session, I'll be coaching everyone through the different stages of the Gold Key release and taking questions, making sure that everybody gets it going in them. I'm going to take a moment here and make a little technical change involving headphones. I'll be right back.
Where's YouTube? Yeah, YouTube's off, but I wanted to rejoin the title.
All right, and we're back. So I'm going to say a few words on the tongue mudra to explain what it does, how, and why. Then I'll be taking us all through 6 different, increasingly integrated versions of the tongue mudra. And then, time permitting, I'll take questions and feedback at the end of this session. So, to begin, the Gold Key release is a procedure that works with attention, intention, memory, and imagination, as do all of the tetraseed transformation procedures. And those procedures use language to guide you through the changes. The tongue mudra does not use language to produce its changes. The only language needed is the language for me to teach you how to do it to begin with. But in your practice of it, it's a nonverbal action, and it involves bringing balance and openness to us at the core. And I need to say a few words about core because it's a commonly misused term, usually used to refer to the abdominal wall. And actually, the core is like the core of an apple, it's at the center. And we experience the core as the center of breathing and also where food goes when we swallow. It's our deepest depth. And the tongue goes straight to that deepest depth. And so the tongue mudra is a way of getting us access to our own depth and making internal spontaneous changes that have many effects. Apart from just clearing the mind, the tongue mudra also changes posture, breathing, the sense of openness in the head, attention, and general focus. We're using the tongue mudra then to boost the effects of the tetraseed transformation procedures. And I've seen a little bit of feedback here, so I'm going to check on what that's about. Okay. So someone has posed the question about this broadcast being with nobody else in this on-camera section. And I provided the link into this, what's called Green Room, so that people may, if they wish, participate actively and deliver questions at opportune times during our session here. So I trust that answers that comment. And getting back to the tongue mudra, the tongue mudra is a much further development of a yogic technique involving touching the tongue to the roof of the mouth. And it's said to trigger the release of what the Sanskrit term is amrita, translated nectar. And it's a current of bliss. And when the tongue mudra is done properly, certain changes occur in one that do indeed trigger a bliss sensation. More than the usual kind of transcendental bliss, it's more a kind of a euphoric feeling that goes along with a deep sense of rest or equilibrium. Now, in the yogic traditions, there are channels through which it's referred to as energy, or I say sensation, right and left, that go from the base of the spine up the spine through chakra centers. The term chakra refers to sensation centers associated with particular functions or actions or states of the person. There being 7 major ones that go from the tailbone up to the crown of the head. And the one at the crown of the head is the 7th. The 6th is in the brain core, and it corresponds to the place between the eyes. I mention this because in practice of the tongue mudra, I have found a spontaneous awakening having occurred in myself, in which the location between the eyes came awake, and I feel it as a kind of heightened sensation or pressure. And it's associated also with subtle vision, subtle referring to not the waking state, but closer to dream or imagining state. And that is said to correspond to the pineal gland in the head. I can't attest to that except to say that there is a sensation that gets awakened that feels like it's in the brain core. Whether it's the pineal gland or the pituitary, I don't know, but it's in that general location. And I'll say a bit more when it's useful to say something about that as we get further along into this teaching process. Let's just say, though, that there are right and left subtle channels that go up either side where the chakras are along the central channel. The Sanskrit term is sushumna, the central energy channel that runs from the base of the trunk and tailbone up through the spinal line into the brain core and to the crown where the highest chakra is. And the right and left and the central channel all converge or coincide at the location that's activated by the tongue mudra. The tongue mudra has a centering influence. Centering referring to not just emotional centering, but literally right-left balance. The tongue mudra is a major action for activating these channels of energy sensation and for establishing a deep equilibrium state that is very conducive to meditation or just to clearing your mind, as I wrote in my announcement of this teaching occasion. So I'll be guiding you through actions and sensations that are triggered by the tongue mudra. So I'm going to open for any questions at this moment before we begin. Allow some time for questions to surface in the chat stream. And if nothing occurs fairly soon, I'm going to launch into the instructional segment here. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I'm going to teach you is what I call the sage breath. Sage, S-A-G-E. It's a kind of equilibrium breath that has a few effects. And let me outline those. One of them is to wake up sensation in the palate, the roof of the mouth, and enable you to tell where the back of the hard palate is and where the soft palate begins. The sage breath opens breathing and opens the head and nasal passages for breathing. It's a way of correcting shallow breathing and for preparing you for the later stages of the tongue mudra practice. And the sage breath itself is extremely simple. You coincide two tongue positions, you match up or synchronize two tongue positions with the breathing action. You press the tongue snugly up against the roof of the mouth during exhalation, and you separate the tongue from the roof of the mouth and bring it low into the jaw. You press the tongue downward, making the mouth hollow during inhalation. And so there's an alternate pressing up and lowering down action of the tongue, which, as you practice, you'll feel opens up your breathing. It opens up the abdominal cavity and the chest cavity. At your first practice experience of the sage breath, you will feel these sensations to some degree. I anticipate with practice that they will become, as they did for me, larger and larger, more and more pronounced. So with that, let's launch into the sage breath, and I'm going to coach you through it at the beginning and then give you time to do it without listening, just directly experiencing. So begin this way. Press the flat of your tongue up against your palate. Make it snug front to back, where by back I mean where your molars, your back teeth end. And rub your tongue forward and back. Create a sensation in your palate. Locate what your palate feels like. Do that now. You may notice that not all of your tongue wants to contact your palate at the same time. So practice getting your entire tongue to press up against your palate as you rub forward and backward. You can start by taking whatever part of your tongue most easily presses your palate and notice what parts aren't touching. And as you rub forward and back, add those locations. This will take a little coordination, a little practice. So be patient about that. Notice that your lower jaw wants to help by moving the same direction as your tongue. Help your jaw move exactly the way your lower jaw wants to move. Now, the palate is the roof of the mouth, but the floor of the nose. Directly above the palate is the air space of the nasal passage. Notice how rubbing your tongue forward and back while pressing your palate affects the hollow of your nasal cavity, your nasal passage. Okay, let me know if you need more time to get the sensations that I've referred to. Okay, so now let's begin the pressing up with the tongue and the lowering down of the tongue action. Let's just do the tongue part apart from the breathing at first. So you press your tongue snugly from the tip of the tongue all the way through the center and back of your tongue. And then maintaining contact with the tip of your tongue, make your tongue like a spoon, hollow at the top, and draw your tongue away from your palate. A small move is adequate at the beginning. Notice that when you drop your tongue, your nasal passage opens a bit. When you raise your tongue, when you raise your tongue, your nasal passage closes a little bit. You just alternate lifting and pressing, keeping the tongue tip in contact with the roof of the mouth as you lower, and alternate. Get a little better at that. Now, slow down the tongue action to be in pace with your breathing. So as you inhale, keeping the tongue tip in contact, draw your tongue down. And as you exhale, bring the flat of your tongue against your palate. And gradually increase the amount by which you lower your tongue. You pull your tongue away from your palate. Synchronized with breathing. Exhaling, pressing your tongue upward. Inhaling, drawing your tongue downward. Now you may notice that you're getting a little buzz in your head, maybe a little lightheaded, in which case relax your breathing a bit. You might be just hyperventilating a little. But understand that the opening of breathing from the sage breath may charge you a little bit this way. Just accept it. Now continue the sage breath and notice that as you bring the flat of your tongue up against the palate, you can feel with your tongue your backmost upper molars, backmost upper teeth. When you drop your tongue, you come out of contact with that. When you raise your tongue up against the palate, you feel it again. Locate the back edge of your upper rear teeth each time you lift. Keep your tongue tip in contact. Now, as you exhale, make contact with the back of your tongue up and behind your upper rear teeth. And as you inhale, keep your tongue in that position. So now you're just connecting 3 points with your tongue. without dropping your tongue down, so that your back of your tongue is in contact with your upper jaw behind the upper rear teeth, and your tongue tip in contact with your palate toward the front. And maintain your tongue position that way as you breathe. Very good. Now resume lowering your tongue with inhalation while keeping those 3 points in contact. Now equalize the pressures of those 3 points, two in back, one in front. You equalize by noticing how much pressure you have in the rear right. Then switch your attention to the rear left. And as needed, adjust your tongue position so that the right and left rear are equal pressure. You may find your lower jaw moves to help. Just alternate right, and right, and left. Just in that rhythm. Right, left, right. Hold, pause, and notice how much pressure. And then left, and hold. Notice how much pressure. Alternate until you can't tell which side has more upward pressure behind the upper rear teeth. Now bring your attention to your tongue tip and make your tongue tip press upward with equal pressure to the two places in back. And breathe as you maintain 3-point equal pressure. You may need to have further practice before you can easily maintain 3-point equal pressure, just so you know. Just accept your success to whatever degree at this beginning. You'll notice with 3 points in contact that you can now feel the span of your entire hard palate. A light touch, a light pressure works better than a heavy pressure against your palate. So decrease to the point where you can just feel the pressure. Maintain your breathing with a lighter pressure. In general, this sensitizes your palate. Okay, now next piece. Maintaining 3-point contact, gradually draw your tongue down, and I mean gradually, not suddenly or in a large movement, but in a slow, gradual movement, until you can feel a low enough position of your tongue that you can feel a sensation on the inside of your hard palate, that is, in the inside of your mouth. You may need to explore and experiment, raising and lowering your tongue until you can distinguish sensation in your hard palate. The cupping of your tongue like a spoon is something like a radio dish. It transmits a beam of sensation toward your palate. Find that position and breathe in that position so that the breath seems to move across the sensitized location of your hard palate. Stay with it until that sensation firms up a bit. If you don't feel anything in your palate, it's likely you haven't dropped or lowered your tongue deeply enough into the floor of your mouth. So make an adjustment if it's called for. Now sense inside your nasal cavity and relax the inside of your nose. And this is behind the part of the nose that people can see. It's the deeper part of your nose behind your face. Notice that your soft palate relaxes and hangs. Notice that the place within your nasal passage is a continuation of the place you feel in your hard palate. And breathe across and through the place in your nasal passage that's connected to your hard palate. Your tongue is still in contact at 3 points. Your tongue is cupped like a spoon. You feel your hard palate. You feel the inside of your nasal passage. That place cools as you inhale, warms as you exhale. Now close your eyes if you're not already closed. When that sensation of the hard palate and nasal passage have firmed up enough that you can do this, in your mind's eye, gaze at and through where you feel that sensation. In your mind's eye, gaze at and through the place in your nasal passage and palate where you feel that sensation. Let your nose relax inside and dilate. This isn't flaring the nostrils. It's relaxing the nasal passage behind your face. Warming and cooling. Gazing at and through it in your mind's eye. That's the tongue mudra. When you do tongue mudra, you can get into it fairly quickly. We've taken time to give you detailed instruction, but in practice, you just bring your tongue up behind the upper rear molars, touch with your tongue tip, cup your tongue, feel your hard palate and your nasal passage. You relax the nasal passage. 3 points of light contact of your tongue on your palate. By changing the cupping of your tongue and placing your attention at different places in your hard palate and nasal passage, you can use the tongue mudra to turn on different places in your nasal passage and in your face. You can aim forward and get a sensation that goes from the nose up to the place between the eyes. I mentioned that location. You can turn it on this way. The third eye, sixth chakra. And by cupping your tongue to aim further back, you can turn on different locations. Say the place where the roof of the nose is the floor of the brain cavity where the pituitary and pineal glands are seated in depressions of that bone shaped just the right shape to receive those glands. So you can curl your tongue to aim up into that place. And you can breathe into and across that location. Do that now. It's a place of extra sensitivity. You don't locate it right away, just experiment with the amount of curl in your tongue and aim a little backward, a little forward along the roof of the nasal passage. Aiming back a little further, you can locate the crown of the head. And again, it's a place of extra sensitivity, very similar to the blowhole of a dolphin or a whale. By adjusting the curl of your tongue and where you place your attention, you can breathe into and out through that location. This is the Sahasrara, the seventh chakra. You can use the sage breath now, breathing in and drawing the tongue a little bit down through that aperture, that hole at the crown, pressing the tongue up to breathe out through that place. Be gentle with the tongue. A subtle movement is sufficient. Too hard a movement, and you're likely to miss it altogether. So, at whatever level of push you're using with your tongue, with each breath, decrease very slightly, very gradually until you find the sweet spot. Next position, you can curl your tongue to aim more backward until you feel a soft palate and the space above. That location goes to the highest neck vertebrae, the atlas and the axis, they're called. They are the support of your head, your cranium. And you can turn on that location and gaze into it in your mind's eye. You're likely to undergo spontaneous adjustments of head position, bringing your head back up and on top of your neck better, accompanied very likely by crunchings and the impulse to make internal adjustments. If you're not experiencing that right now, you're likely to experience it with practice. Again, dilating or opening your nasal cavity. By bringing your attention back and down, you can locate the place behind your heart in the spine. Maintaining gentle 3-point contact with the tongue and breathing, you can induce changes to that region of your spine and increasing opening in your breathing. Now you've gotten the hint. You can aim the tongue mudra anywhere from the nasal passage to the place between the eyes, crown of the head, top of the neck, behind the heart, and further down. You can bring it all the way to your sacrum, that is the central bone at the waistline in back of your pelvis. My experience was practice of the tongue mudra started just in the mouth, then to the nasal passage, then to the place behind the eyes and between the eyes. And with continuing practice, openings continued to occur along the lines I've described. You're likely also to undergo spontaneous postural adjustments where you feel like sitting more erectly as a product of internal shifts and relaxations, not as a product of effort or right posture. Okay. That's the basic tongue mudra. There are techniques that follow that amplify the tongue mudra. Before I give you those, I'll comment a bit on the use of the tongue mudra in the gold key release and other tetraseed transformation procedures. If you're working in earnest to use the tetraseed transformation procedures in cleanup, and you use it on areas that you know in your life are either particularly charged or dense, or really have got you, or are crusty and slow to change. When you run through the gold key release at the release step, which is stop imagining, let it dissolve and dissipate, awaken. You may find with these crusty items that they are slow to change or slow to release. Do the tongue mudra then and there while holding whatever feeling or intuition the gold key release has surfaced in you. Put your attention on that while doing the tongue mudra, and you're likely to find that those things dissolve almost instantly and in a way that you didn't expect. Use the tongue mudra. There's a more sophisticated use of the tongue mudra in the gold key release. At the step that goes, notice the intensity of intention in it, from it, toward it, about it. As soon as you get that surface to that sensation to consolidate, not surface, that sensation to consolidate, go into tongue mudra and maintain tongue mudra throughout the rest of the gold key release. And you'll find that your releases are more complete, cut more deeply, and happen faster. So now the next technique of the tongue mudra. Your tongue is in position. You've got the tongue mudra going so that you can feel the inside of the nasal passage turned on by the tongue position and connected with the palate. Because you have 3 points in contact, you've got a pretty good seal between your tongue and your palate. You now begin a very gentle upward and downward undulating movement of the tongue, enough that you can feel it affecting your palate. As you lift your tongue, you feel your palate float upward just a little bit. And as you lower your tongue, you feel a force drawing your palate down a little bit. It's as if your palate is floating, which in fact, it actually is. Your palate is in a floating relationship to the neighboring bones of your head, the maxilla, they're called, in which the upper teeth are mounted. And yes, indeed, your palate does float, but you tend to have your palate float in a fixed position because your head tensions are generally fixated. Whereas, as you're discovering, the tongue mudra causes your head to soften a little bit, causes the bones of the head to rest in the more of a floating relationship. And if you've experienced the crunchings of your upper neck and head that I described with different positionings of the tongue mudra, you're experiencing that floating relationship, and you can deliberately increase it to speed the internal changes that occur from the tongue mudra. And these changes result in a mental clarifying state that is a process of your mind getting clearer and clearer and noticing the ways in which your gaze of your inner eye is not centered or even right to left. And by intending the right and left sides to become more equal, further mental clarification occurs and releases occur that you didn't know could occur. So by doing the floating palate technique, you stimulate, accelerate, and increase these internal changes. The rise and lowering of your tongue occurs about once every 2 seconds. So slow down and slow down and slow down the rising and falling of your tongue until you feel your palate going along with your tongue movements. If you go too fast or too far, you'll get a disconnect between your palate and your tongue. Slow down, make the movements smaller until the two engage and stay engaged throughout the rising and falling. You'll find the exact speed by experimentation. Once you've got a good engagement between your tongue and your floating palate, again, gaze into and through the place you feel the greatest sensation. Let's continue on to the next technique. I call the next technique the bite your tongue version of the tongue mudra. Up to this point, you've been pressing the upper rear of your tongue into the space behind your upper rear teeth. This is where the change of technique occurs. Instead of lifting your tongue up to that place behind the upper teeth, you bring the rear edges of your tongue gently between your upper and rear teeth and back. This may take a little bit of practice and experimentation to get both sides sandwiched in a gentle nibbling fashion between your rear molars. Get one side going. Just move your tongue over. Experiment with nibbling on the edge of your tongue. Keep decreasing the nibble until you can feel how soft and spongy your tongue is. That also means slow down the nibbling so you can actually feel your tongue change shape at the edge. When you've got it on one side, switch sides. Get the gentle bite your tongue happening on your other side. Regulate the amount of nibble until you can feel the consistency of your tongue between your teeth. Very gradual, soft movement. Now alternate sides. Do 2 nibbles on each side. Notice your lower jaw may move to help. Let that be so. Now, when you're good at getting either side between your teeth, relax your tongue. Let your tongue spread and get both sides between your teeth at the same time. You may have to alternate using smaller and smaller left-right movements until you can get both sides engaged, and you may lose it and have to refine it again and again, at least in the very beginning. Now, when you've got the technique down, it'll be easy just to insert your tongue between your upper and lower teeth, at which point you equalize left and right. And bring the tip of your tongue into position. And begin a gentle lifting and lowering movement of your lower jaw and tongue as you did in the floating palate technique. And notice that you feel it not just in your palate, but in your upper rear teeth and in the bone connections that go up into your cranium, into your head. They go all the way up to the brain cavity, the sensations of pressure. Through a gentle undulatory rhythm, as you bite more and less, sense that pressure of biting go up through your cranium. Again, you may need to alternate left and right. Until you can find equal left and right. Get your best approximation of equal now. And now that you can sense that conduction of bone pressure, alternate left and right and feel high up in your head where that bone pressure is, and cause it to swing to the left and to the right by alternating your gentle biting pressure, left and right. Notice if it feels continuous, swinging left to right and right to left, or whether there's a gap where you lose the sensation. Regulate your nibbling left and right until you can find continuity between left and right. When you can find continuity, you can decrease the degree to which you go left and right to locate the center. Do that now. Once you've found the center, in your mind's eye, gaze into and through it. Your nasal passage is dilated, open, round. As if the space between your cupped tongue and the uppermost space has the shape of a walnut. In the shell. If you don't have walnuts, you can try pecans. Don't do peanuts, too small, wrong shape. Now, as before, you can project the sensation further forward or further back. At this point, that sensation is like a little cleaning tool. It shows you where you're constricted and restricted in your nasal passage and in your cranium, your head. And by placing your attention in the constricted or closed locations and breathing and gazing, you can get those locations to soften and open. As they soften and open, you're likely to find all manner of changes occurring down the spinal line. Just keep your attention mainly in what you're doing with the tongue mudra and let the other changes occur as they will. You'll be tempted to put a little extra attention on those locations. That's fine. That will help the changes to occur, but make the main focus of your feeling attention the tongue mudra in your cranium. Okay. So we're going to move now to the next technique, which is a full assembly of everything that you've practiced before. And here's how you do it. You start by bringing the back of your tongue up to the space behind the upper molars. Balance right and left. And with those 2 points in place, gently and slowly lower and cup your tongue until you feel something in your palate, above the cup of the tongue. Breathe across it. Make it sensitized. In your mind's eye, gaze into and through it. By cupping your tongue slightly more, cause that sensation to go into your nasal cavity. Let your nasal cavity dilate, open up. Connected with your palate and your cupped tongue. You may find yourself opening more completely in back at the back end of your nostrils. They begin at the upper rear throat. The sensation does. Now that you've got that sensation in your palate and nasal passage, maintain that sensation as you slowly bring the tip of your tongue in contact with the place in your palate that allows you to continue to feel your palate and nasal passage the same place. Equalize pressure of the tip of your tongue and the back of your tongue in those two places and back. Now you're feeling your cupped tongue, your palate, your nasal cavity. You're gazing into and through it. Gently do floating palate technique. Feel the pull that draws your palate down and changes how your head wants to rest at the top of your neck. While doing floating palate, notice your lower jaw wants to help, wants to close slightly when you're pressing or lifting your tongue up, and to drop as your tongue gently lowers, drawing your palate down. Slow down now more and more. In order for your palate to track with your lower jaw, you need to keep slowing down until you feel the proper pace. Now your lower jaw gently comes up, and as in the bite the tongue technique, your lower jaw helps your tongue to be seated in its upper position. Then as you let your lower jaw drop a bit, your tongue gently, slightly decreases pressure in that place up and behind the upper rear teeth. The effects are even greater. Continue to gaze at, into, and through the place in your nasal passage. Now bring your tongue up. Your lower jaw gently helps. And press your tongue very slightly forward against the upper rear teeth, or whatever you're in contact with. You'll feel a change in the bone pressure. Your facial bones gently come loose and come a bit forward. Maintain the floating palate and the bite your tongue technique. This technique would be particularly helpful with really crusty items on which you're running the gold key release or other tetraseed transformation procedures. Here's a final technique. I call this the cranium float. Not the floating palate, but the cranium float. And it goes like this. You get the full assembly of that tongue mudra that we've just been doing. And you cause the sensation to move gently forward and backward, not by shifting your lower jaw forward and backward, but by shifting your upper cranium forward and backward over your tongue. So your whole head is gently moving forward and backward, maintaining the contact connection between your nasal passage, palate, tongue, and lower jaw. You may then play with your breathing while you do this gentle movement, and notice how your breathing helps you to further release, to open in the tongue mudra. So again, you've got the full assembly where your lower jaw, tongue, palate, and inside nasal passage, and even deeper, if you can feel deeper into your cranium to the crown. And then you move your head, your cranium, gently forward and back over your lower jaw. So your lower jaw, in effect, stays in the same space without moving forward or back. Your upper cranium does the moving, and the effect is as if your lower jaw were moving backward and forward, but it's actually your cranium through a neck movement that's moving forward and back over your tongue and lower jaw. Okay. Needless to say, this will improve with practice. In the very beginning, it may be enough just to feel you're making the contacts of the tongue mudra as described. Staying with it for a few minutes, maintaining the gazing and the breathing across the sensitized place, you're likely to experience all kinds of unpredictable changes in posture, shape, tension, breathing, mental clarity, and the sense of where your core of yourself actually is. The sage breath and the basic tongue mudra are powerful in themselves. If you do nothing more than practice those for a few minutes and incorporate those into the gold key release, you'll have done well. At some point, you'll become intrigued as to what the effects of the more sophisticated versions of the tongue mudra would be. And you'll start experimenting with the up and down floating palate, the side to side bite your tongue, the full assembly, and the forward backward movement of the cranium float, each of which produces larger, far reaching effects. Combined with the gold key release and other tetraseed transformation procedures, the transformational potential is massive and always leads to your feeling better seated, comfortable in your own core, with your actions, thoughts, and emotions emanating from that open core condition. Those words are, I should think, all but meaningless until you have the experience, and then they will make plain sense. So that completes this session of instruction in the tongue mudra and its advanced variations. And we have time for ask and tell or any requests with regard to this instruction. I'm going to sit here for a bit and allow any ask or tell to surface. And if in a fairly short order I don't hear or see anything, then we'll conclude this session. Just a final word, I'm conducting another session in the tongue mudra a week hence. Okay. Well, I have one comment. I'll share that, and it looks like we'll wrap things up. One comment. As usual, Lawrence, it's been a trip I explored my cranial anatomy. Thanks. Exactly. That brings to mind something, which is a piece that I started called You Can Do Craniosacral Therapy on Yourself with the tongue mudra. It's true. You can create apparently all the potential effects of craniosacral therapy using these techniques of tongue mudra. And in fact, they're very similar. In standard craniosacral therapy, the amount of finger pressure of the practitioner is described as about the weight of a nickel, American coin, about 5 grams, very light. And when you're doing the tongue mudra and the bite your tongue maneuver, uh, bite your tongue technique variation, and the floating palate, it's very much the same. The advantage being you have a ringside first row seat to what's going on in you that a craniosacral therapist does not have. Although I expect that a very proficient craniosacral therapist would be so sensitive that they could detect from outside what you're detecting inside, but here you can do it for yourself. All right, then, let's wind this up. And you have my email address from previous communications should you want to communicate with me. And I think that's it. So let's say goodbye for now. We'll see what happens next week.